He had never once waited for anything in his life. That was the first thing Sable Orin noticed about the man who walked into the Marquette Club at 7:14 on a Thursday evening. Not the cut of his suit, not the way the rooms seemed to contract around him like a lung losing air. Not even the two men who materialized at his flanks without being called. It was the way he moved through the front entrance without slowing, without checking whether the maitre d' was ready, without acknowledging that there were 11 other people already standing in line. He simply walked, and the world rearranged itself accordingly. Sable watched him from behind the hostess podium, where she had spent the last 6 years watching men like him. And there had never been a man quite like. His name was Vincent Caro. She knew this the way she knew every name in the private dining ledger, the way she knew which table had the loose leg on the east side, the way she knew that the Marquette's backup generator kicked in 11 seconds after the main power cut. Sable Orin had made a habit of knowing things that other people overlooked. It was safer that way. It kept her invisible. Vincent Caro was 41 years old, ran the Caro Syndicate out of a glass tower on South Michigan Avenue, and had not been inside the Marquette Club in 8 months. The last time, she remembered, he had sent his food back twice and left a tip that was larger than her monthly grocery budget. He had also not looked at her once. She did not expect tonight to be different. "Table for Caro," said the shorter of the two men flanking him, a compact, careful-eyed man whose name she did not know. He said it the way people said things they expected to be acted on immediately. Of course. Sable pulled up the reservation on the screen, already knowing it was there, already knowing it was table 4. The booth in the northeast corner, partial wall, sightlines to both exits, no windows behind the primary seat. She had set it herself that afternoon when the reservation came in. Right this way. She came out from behind the podium, and that was when it happened. Vincent Caro looked at her, not a glance. Not the automatic flicker of acknowledgement people gave service staff, the look that slid off a person without registering anything human. He looked at her the way a man looked at something that had surprised him, which, she suspected, almost nothing did anymore. His eyes moved. Unhurried, deliberate, from her face down to her shoulders, to the wide curve of her hips beneath her uniform skirt, to the stolid, unashamed weight of her standing there in her sensible heels with a leather-bound menu in her hands. It was the kind of look that had made her want to disappear. Once. She had spent the first 23 years of her life learning to vanish before someone could look at her like that. She was 29 now. She had stopped disappearing. "Table 4 is in the northeast corner," she said evenly. Because that was her job, and she was good at her job. "Follow me, please." She turned and walked. She already knew he would. The trouble started at 9:47. The trouble started at 9:47. Sable was at the service station behind the partition, updating the reservation log for the following evening, when she heard the voice carry across the floor. "Just a question. A simple one. Does the Marquette have a policy about this? Or is it a personal initiative?" She recognized the timbre before she identified the words. Low, controlled, calibrated, to carry precisely as far as the speaker intended and no further. Vincent Caro was speaking to someone, and from the particular quality of the silence that had settled around table 4, Sable understood that whatever he was saying, it was not good. She came around the partition. The target was a floor manager named Dennis, who had made the mistake of lingering near the table with one of the sommelier's assistants, and who was now standing with the rigid posture of a man who desperately wished he had chosen a different career. "I'm sorry, Mr. Caro. I'm not sure The woman who seated us," Vincent said. His hands were flat on the table. His food was untouched. "Is she the regular hostess?" "She is, sir. Sable has been with us 6. She's been circling the floor for the last hour and a half." He said it the way a man stated a fact he found faintly beneath him to have noticed. Every other table she's seated tonight had a waiter assigned within 4 minutes. My table has had the same sommelier's assistant for 90 minutes, no assigned waiter, and the beef I ordered 20 minutes ago has not arrived." He paused. "I want to understand whether this is incompetence or policy." Dennis opened his mouth. Sable got there first. "Mr. Caro," she said it clearly, stepping into the table's orbit the way she had learned to do, not aggressive, not apologetic, just present. A fact. "Your waiter is Thomas. He was managing a medical situation with a guest in the West dining room. He'll be with you within the next 2 minutes, and I've already flagged your beef with the kitchen. It left the pass 40 seconds ago." Vincent Caro turned his head and looked at her. That look again. Slightly different this time. More assessing. 40 seconds, he repeated. 40 seconds, she confirmed. "I can have Thomas bring a complimentary course while you wait, or I can walk you through the delay personally. Either way, the fault was scheduling, not attention. Your table has had my attention all evening." There was a pause that she felt in her sternum. "Not a question. Every table does," she said. "It's my job." Something shifted at the corner of his mouth. Not quite a smile. Something more precise than that. "Your name," he said. She had not planned to tell him. She was not sure why she did. Sable. He held her gaze for a moment with the unhurried confidence of a man who had never once been told his time was up. "Tell Thomas," he said finally, "not to rush." Thomas arrived in 90 seconds. The beef arrived in 2 minutes and 40 seconds total. Sable logged both times in her head and returned to the podium. She told herself the conversation was finished. She was wrong about that, it turned out, the way she was sometimes wrong about things that had nothing to do with numbers. Vincent Caro came back the following Thursday, and the one after that. On the third Thursday, he arrived at 7:12 instead of 7:14, which Sable noticed because Chicage noticed everything, and which meant nothing. She told herself, which she had to tell herself a second time to believe. On the fourth Thursday, there was no reservation in the system. She found this out at 6:50 when she was doing her final check of the evening's ledger, and her stomach did something complicated and unrelated to hunger. She refreshed the system. Still nothing. She double-checked against the paper backup. Nothing. She had spent 4 Thursdays quietly, professionally ensuring that table 4 was set at 6:45, that the particular Barolo he ordered was already breathing, that Thomas was pre-assigned and pre-briefed. She moved the Barolo back to the cellar inventory and told herself this was fine. He arrived at 7:10. No reservation. 2 men she hadn't seen before, flanking him on the left. He came directly to the podium, which he had never done before. He had always allowed his people to handle that. He stopped in front of her, and for a moment neither of them said anything, and Sable was aware of several things simultaneously. That her heartbeat had done something embarrassing, that she was gripping the edge of the podium, and that Vincent Caro was looking at her in a way that made her very conscious of the space she occupied. She occupied more space than the hostess stands she'd worked at in her 20s seemed built for. She had spent years trying to take up less of it. She had never quite managed. "You don't have a reservation," she said. "I don't," he agreed. "Thursday nights are typically full by I know." He said it without apology. "Is table 4 available?" She had not moved the reservation she'd ghost set for him until 30 minutes ago. Table 4 was, as it happened, available. "It is," she said. He waited. "Right this way," she said, and came out from behind the podium and led him across the floor, and tried not to think about the fact that she could feel his attention on the back of her neck like a hand not quite touching. He spoke to her that night. Not through his men, not around her. To her, he flagged her down at the end of service, when the dining room had thinned to 3 other tables, and Thomas was running the dessert course, and asked her to sit. She almost laughed. She didn't. "I'm working," she said. "I know." He said this the way he seemed to say most things, with absolute awareness of the facts and zero interest in being deterred by them. "I'm asking anyway." She looked at him for a moment. She thought about protocol and employment policies, and the 11 things she still had to do before close. She thought about the way her thighs would look in the booth seat, and whether the bench would feel too narrow, and whether he would look at her, the way certain men looked at women who took up space, like they were inconveniences in a world not designed for them. Vincent Caro was not looking at her like that. He was looking at her like she was the most specific thing in the room. She sat down. He asked her how long she'd been at the Marquette. She told him 6 years. He asked why she'd stayed. She said because she was good at it, and the pay was steady, and she liked knowing where things were. He asked what she meant by that last part. She said, "When you know a room well enough, it stops surprising you, and when nothing surprises you, nothing can use surprise against you." He was quiet for a moment. "You said that like someone who's been surprised badly before," he said. "Most people have been. That's not an answer." "No," she agreed, "it's not." He looked at her. She looked back. Outside, somewhere on Michigan Avenue, a siren peaked and faded. "I run a company," he said, which was the cleanest possible way to describe what Vincent Caro ran, and she appreciated the economy of it. "My current accounts manager is retiring at the end of the month. The position requires discretion, precision, and someone who does not get surprised easily." He paused. "I've watched you work for a month. 3 billing errors, managed a kitchen fire that the dining room never knew happened, and you seated my table without a confirmed reservation on 48 hours of observation that I am fairly certain you were aware of." Sable said nothing. "You noticed me noticing," he said. "Not a question. 4 Thursdays, she said carefully. "Same table, same wine, same 2 men. Different car each time, which I thought was interesting. You use the east entrance when there's traffic on Wabash, and the south entrance when there isn't, which means you're coming from the direction of the river. The reservation was always made from a number that showed up as private, but the requests were identical each time, which means it was the same person, same system, and you like things consistent." She stopped. She had said too much. She could feel it. "I just pay attention." The corner of his mouth did that thing again, the not quite smile. "Yes," he said, "I've noticed." She looked down at the table. "I'm a hostess, currently," he said. She did not take the job that night. She told him she needed to think about it, which was true, and she went home to her apartment in Pilsen and sat on her kitchen floor. She did her best thinking on the kitchen floor, which her last boyfriend had found strange and her therapist had found revealing, and made a list in her head. The list of reasons to say no was long and practical, and made excellent sense. The list of reasons to say yes had only one entry, but it was honest. She was tired of being invisible, and Vincent Caro was the first person in a long time who had looked at her like she was not. She called the number he had given her at 8:15 the following morning. He picked up on the second ring. "I have conditions," she said without preamble, because she had decided on the kitchen floor that if she was going to do this, she was going to do it like herself. Not smaller, not apologetic. Like the woman who had stopped disappearing at 23 and sometimes forgot to be afraid of how much space she took up. A pause on the line. Then, "Tell me," she told him. "Standard rate plus 20% for irregular hours. Full discretion clause, mutual, binding, no exceptions." She would not be asked to attend events where her presence could be construed as personal. She would not be asked to perform any function that required her to compromise her professional judgment. And if she ever found discrepancies in the books that implicated anyone in his organization, anyone, she would report them through the standard channels he designated, and it would not be treated as a personal act against him. Silence. "The last condition?" he said. "Yes, that's unusual. I know. Most people in your position would call that a threat. Most people in your position would call it leverage." She said, "I'm calling it transparency. I want you to know exactly what you're hiring." Another silence. Longer. She gripped her phone and did not let herself fill it. "Agreed," Vincent Caro said. "All conditions. Monday morning, 9 o'clock, my office," she exhaled. "I'll be there at 8:55, she said. The first 6 weeks were the most disorienting of her professional life, and she had once spent 11 days untangling a fraud scheme at a riverboat casino, while reporting to a man who was also the fraud scheme. The Caro organization's books were meticulous on the surface and baroque underneath. Legal revenue from 6 property holding companies, 2 logistics firms, and a restaurant group flowed through a structure so layered it would have been genuinely beautiful if it hadn't been genuinely terrifying. Sable worked in a glass-walled office 2 floors below Vincent's, with a dedicated server line and any questions through his executive assistant, a dry, ageless woman named Mrs. Chu, who communicated primarily through short emails and occasional approving nods. She did not see Vincent often. When she did, it was brief, a question about a quarterly report, a request to review a contract, before it went in the elevator where they rode 17 floors in a silence that felt less like absence and more like a conversation conducted in a register she didn't have vocabulary for yet. She told herself she was imagining it. She was good at telling herself things. It was the 8th week when she found it. A routing number that appeared in 3 separate subsidiary ledgers, but corresponded to an account that didn't exist in the master registry. Small amounts under the automatic reporting threshold, dispersed across 11 months, totaling, when she ran figure, $432,000. 400. She sat very still at her desk for approximately 40 seconds. Then she printed the documentation, put it in a manila envelope, and walked it to Mrs. Chu. "I need 15 minutes with Mr. Caro," she said. Today, Mrs. Chu looked at the envelope. Then at Sable. Then she picked up the phone. She got 20 minutes. Vincent was on a call when she came in. He ended it without explaining why, which she had noticed he did when something else took priority, and directed his full attention to her in the way he had, completely, immediately, like a spotlight finding its mark. She put the envelope on his desk. "There's a skimming operation in the Lakeshore subsidiary," she said. 11 months, 432,000 total. Current accumulation rate suggests the person responsible expected to reach a round number before exiting. She paused. "I've routed it through your compliance contact as per the terms I outlined when you hired me. This is a courtesy notification, not a request for guidance." He had not opened the envelope. He was looking at her. "You memorized the accumulation rate," he said. "I ran the numbers 4 times. The rate is consistent. Who else knows? No one. I work alone and I shred my notes. A beat. The compliance contact," he said carefully, "is going to send this to legal, who will send it to my internal investigation team. Yes, the person responsible may be someone I know, possibly, and you're not." He stopped, seemed to recalibrate. "You're not asking me what to do with it. That's not what you hired me for." She kept her voice even and her spine straight, and tried not to think about the fact that she was alone in a room with Vincent Caro. Having just handed him documentation that implicated someone inside his organization, and that the conditions she'd named on a kitchen floor in Pilsen 2 months ago were the only thing standing between her and a problem she did not want to have. "You hired me to find discrepancies and report them accurately. I did that. What happens next is your business, not mine." Vincent Caro was very quiet. Then he leaned back in his chair, and he looked at her, and it was different from the restaurant, different from the elevator, different from every version of that look she had catalogued over 8 weeks of trying not to catalog it. And he said, "I tested you." She went very still. "The account," he said. "The routing number. The 11-month dispersal pattern." His voice was measured, the way it always was, but there was something underneath it she had not heard before. "I created it. 8 weeks ago, the same week you started. I wanted to know how long it would take you to find it, what you'd do when you did. and whether you'd come to me first or go around me. The silence in the room was total. You went around me, he said, exactly as you said you would, before you even told me it existed. She breathed in, breathed out. And if it had been real, she said, it would have had the same outcome. He said it without hesitation, because I would have wanted to know what you'd do, and now I do. He picked up the envelope, set it down again. 400 and the accumulation rate suggested was exact, he said. Down to the cent. I'm aware. Something in his face shifted, not softened exactly, but opened, the way a room opened when you turned on a light you hadn't known was there. Do you know why I chose you, Sable? Not from the Marquette. From the 6 candidates my people shortlisted. She said nothing, because every other candidate, when I described the compliance reporting protocol, either agreed too quickly or asked me what to do in situations where the protocol might be inconvenient. He paused. You were the only one who told me in advance, explicitly, what you'd do if you found something on me. And you were the only one who made that a condition of working for me rather than a hypothetical. She looked at her hands, then back up at him. I thought you might fire me for it, she said. I know, he said. You said it anyway. The test made things different, not in ways she could point to directly. He did not change how he spoke to her in meetings. Precise, direct, efficient. Mrs. Chu did not send her different kinds of emails. The work was the same. But occasionally, after a late quarter close or a documentation run that stretched past 8 o'clock, she would find that someone had had food delivered to her office from a restaurant nearby. Not the Marquette, different places, the kind of places that required someone to pay attention to what she'd mentioned in passing. A Sichuan place she'd said she'd never tried. A bakery she'd referenced when explaining to Mrs. Chu that she took her coffee the same way every day because consistency reduced decision fatigue. She did not mention it to him. He did not mention it to her. They maintained this comfortable fiction for approximately 3 weeks. It ended on a Tuesday. She was leaving at 9:30, which was late but not her latest, and she came off the elevator to find the lobby empty except for the night security guard and Vincent Caro standing near the front entrance in his coat, clearly not having left, clearly having been waiting for something. He looked at her. She stopped. You're still here, she said. I had a late call. He said it with the specific neutrality of a man providing an explanation he knew wasn't quite convincing. Your calls usually end by 7. A pause. You've noticed my schedule, he said. She had. She was aware she had. She was less clear on what to do with that awareness. I notice things, she said. It's your job, he said. I know. And something in the way he said it. Not dismissive, but almost gentle. The way you repeated something come back to someone when you wanted them to hear how it sounded at a small distance made her stop. She looked at him, standing there in the empty lobby of his own building, and she thought about kitchens, floors, and lists, and the particular tiredness of being careful all the time. She thought about what it had cost her to sit down across from him in the Marquette and say, I have conditions, like she had the right to take up that much space. The food deliveries, she said. The Sichuan place, the bakery. He didn't deny it. I wasn't sure if it was appropriate, he said. Which was, she thought, the most human thing she had ever heard him say. Vincent Caro, who ran a criminal empire with the quiet competence of a man filing quarterly taxes, standing in his own lobby uncertain whether sending dinner was appropriate. It wasn't inappropriate, she said carefully. That's not the same as it being appropriate. No, she agreed. It's not. They looked at each other. On Michigan Avenue, a cab laid on its horn and someone shouted something, and the city did what it always did, indifferent and enormous. I don't know how to do this, he said, whatever this is. He said it the way he said difficult things, straight, without performance, like a man who had decided that honesty was more efficient than everything else. Sable thought about the hostess stand she'd hidden behind for 6 years, and the ways she'd learned to make herself smaller, and the night she'd sat on a kitchen floor and written a list that ended with tired of being invisible, and chose the honest thing. "Neither do I," she said. "But I think we're both better at things we've never done before than we expect to be." His mouth did the thing, the not-quite smile that she had spent 4 months categorizing and had never quite successfully filed. "That's optimistic," he said. "I'm a realist," she said. "Realists can be optimistic. We just require evidence first." A pause. Then he held the door, not reaching past her, not directing her, just held it, the way a person held a door for someone they were going somewhere with. She walked through. Outside, the city was its usual organized chaos, and the night air was cold coming off the lake, and Sable Orin, who had spent most of her life making herself smaller in spaces that weren't built for her, walked out of the building at the side of a man who had never once in his life waited for anything, except it turned out for the right thing to come along. She didn't know yet what came next. She was working on that. She had a list started, and the kitchen floor cleared, and for the first time in a long time, she wasn't tired at all.